Hey there, friend. Welcome back to another episode of Joy at Home. I've got an extra special treat for you today. My daughter, Chloe, is joining me on the podcast, and we are going to be talking about this thing that we did.
Sorry, my mom is a millennial.
As I would say, but Chloe doesn't love it when I say we did a thing. We did a thing. Welcome to the podcast, Chloe.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about my favorite book.
Chloe just recently turned 16 and she truly is a delight. We have our moments, right? We don't always see eye to eye, but truth be told, Chloe is a great girl and I am so very proud of her and the young woman that she is growing up to be. I told her or tell her sometimes she puts me to shame because she has really transformed into this beautiful, feminine young woman who just loves modesty and loves the Lord and loves good books, right?
Yep.
That's what we're going to be talking about today. So, all right, Chloe, I'll turn it over to you to tell everyone about the thing that we did.
Okay. We did a thing, guys. So we went to the homeschool convention this year, the Midwest Homeschool Convention, right?
Yes.
And I went to a talk, one of Andrew Pudewa's talks, and he was talking about how we need to read fiction and that even people who, like my mom, think it's a waste of time or like that if you can't learn something from a book, you shouldn't spend the time reading it, which is okay. Everyone feels differently, but that I don't remember exactly what he said, but it's like good for your brains to read some things that maybe you can just let your imagination run wild with. So on the way home, I told mom that I would make her a deal that I wanted her to read one of my favorite fantasy books, The Goose Girl. This. And that in turn I would read as many pages of her choice. So it ended up being two books, The Greatest Miracle in the World by Og Mandino and First Steps to Wealth by Danny Johnson. I haven't finished Danny Johnson's book yet, but I already did read Og Mandino's book. And she started reading it and then was like, oh, I kind of like this. Oh, I really like this. And she read it in about 3 sittings, which is crazy for her because this was 400 pages. And
That's true.
yeah, that's kind of what it was.
Yeah. So essentially, we did a book swap. And I love how you kind of stated that we really branched out of our respective comfort zones, right? And so
Yeah,
we kind of,
I don't like reading nonfiction.
right. And I don't quote unquote waste time reading fiction or fantasy books, or I didn't before we did this little book swap, a thing that we did. But yeah, I love how you were just kind of sharing that it was like this thing that stretched us. Um, Everyone knows that we both adore Andrew Pudewa and his insights. He is just a delight in the homeschooling world, and we highly respect his insights and his perspective. And so, yeah, he was talking about reading books that stretch us. And so then we kind of came up with this idea for a book swap. And again, those books that we're going to be diving into a little bit deeper today. Chloe had me read The Goose Girl, like she shared, which is part of the Books of Bayern series by Shannon Hale. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Yes. And then
there's 4 books. It's sort of a series, also sort of a collection. Like you could read each book by itself, but the characters do kind of bleed through.
yes. And then I chose The Greatest Miracle in the World by Og Mandino, which is probably my favorite book of all time. And First Steps to Wealth by Danny Johnson. I will be sure to link all these 3 books up in the show notes. The 2 books that I chose for Chloe honestly changed my life, like transformed my life big time. Danny Johnson, I would say she was definitely a mentor in my life at just the right time. And I highly respect her. And then Og Mandino's insights in The Greatest Miracle in the World are just so, so good. So that's kind of the basis for what we did. And so we want to kind of just dive into the plot lines or the main points of these books, and then we can kind of piggyback off each other. So here's what's so fun and interesting. And this might just kind of kill you a little bit on the inside, Chloe, but I get to share the plot line of The Goose Girl since that's the book that I read.
I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about that.
And then you can jump in. You can jump in And then you're going to share just a little bit about the two books that I chose for you. So 400 pages inside of the Goose Girl, again, the equivalent of the two books that I chose for Chloe in the book swap. But yeah, essentially the Goose Girl is a fantasy fiction. I feel like I would call it. Am I saying that right? Is that the right genre?
Yeah, a fantasy. It's not like dragons or that type of fantasy. It's like kingdoms. She's a princess. The
Yeah.
main character is a princess.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's like in my opinion, the most toned down type of fantasy with like the least violence.
Yes.
It's not like Game of or like Lord of the Rings.
Yes. Yeah. Which we're going to be reading actually.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, we're going to be reading that this school year together for Read Aloud. But yes. Yes, gentle fantasy. I feel like
yeah, that makes sense.
That was the perfect. I feel like you chose the perfect starting point for me. So, Princess Anadori Kiladra. So her name was hard to pronounce. Okay, I'm gonna say that Anadori Kiladra. How did you pronounce?
I think it's Anidori.
Anidori. Okay,
but her nickname is just Ani or Annie.
Okay, so the plot line, the princess, oh my gosh, where do I even start? The princess is set to become queen of her kingdom. There is a lot of friction between her and her mother. She tragically, like, I don't want to spoil the book, but I have to share some main points. So she tragically loses her father, who she's very close to. And as this is kind of all unfolding, she's kind of realizing this somewhat gift that she has of speaking with animals.
With geese.
With geese.
Or wait, was it swans?
Swans.
I think it was swans.
Swans.
A type of bird.
So she realizes this gift that she has about speaking with birds. And she kind of has a mentor that kind of pulls this gift out of her or shows her that she has this gift. But I'm going to let you read the book for yourself because I don't want to give all the good parts away.
This is hard for me to not just be like, this is what happened.
So anyhow, she ends up, there is some elements of betrayal and surprise. And she ends up being betrothed to a prince in a different kingdom.
In an enemy kingdom that is much larger than her kingdom and could possibly in the future be going to war with them.
Yes.
So it was supposed to be sort of like a peace thing.
Right. So her mom kind of like goes behind her back.
Yes.
Goes behind the king's back and goes behind her, the princess's back, and sets up this betrothal in this other kingdom, this enemy kingdom. And she is traveling to this other kingdom, and there is a massive falling out and betrayal and treason that is happening along the way, which was that part honestly was very hard for me to read about because there were slight elements of gore, I guess. There's not very much of that in the book, but there were some elements of that in that part of the book. And I was like,
yeah,
oh, I don't know that I'm that into this. So that was about what, a third of the way or halfway through the book. And I was like, oh, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I would say a third.
Yeah. But then she ends up in the kingdom and all these things are unfolding. And she, I'm trying to figure out how to say it without giving the whole book away. She makes a bunch of new friends. She ends up as a goose girl.
A royal working like at the palace with the royal animals, with the royal geese. Royal geese sounds funny, but essentially with the king's geese and taking care of them with a bunch of other like young people her age taking care of all of these animals.
Yeah. So because of the plot twist, because of the betrayal, when she ends up in the kingdom, no one knows she's the princess.
Yeah.
But I can't say why, but because of all the betrayal and things that happened on the journey there. So yeah, so she ends up making friends with all of the royal animal keepers and really kind of experiencing this element of family for the very first time.
And not having everything she could ever want. I mean, she was a princess and then she ended up working with geese. And that was a really big change for her. And she kind of discovered parts of herself.
Yes. I love that element of personal growth that was kind of unfolding. But she's also in danger. So this whole time while she's kind of like in one way experiencing peace and freedom and growth and family, she's also still very much in danger, right? And then there's some more plot twists that happen at the end of the book. She meets and falls in love with this boy who is this man, I guess.
Yeah.
He's not who you expect him to be.
He's not who he says he is.
He's not who he says he is. So there's this kind of like romance unfolding, and I loved that part.
But it's a very clean
Oh,
cut.
very
I mean,
clean.
it's not what you would consider like a modern day romance book. It's very,
very wholesome.
wholesome. That was
Like
the
my
word I was
favorite
looking
word,
for.
right? Very wholesome, very sweet, very romantic. And then in the end of the book, I'm just gonna say it has a perfect happy ending.
It's wonderful.
It is such a great ending. Okay, so that's all I'm gonna say about the plot line and kind of the main points of this book. I will let you share just a little bit, whatever you want about these two books. I know you read the entire Greatest Miracle in the World. That one's finished. I know you're still working on the other book, so you just share the main points that you want to share on those.
Yeah, I've told her I'm not very good at remembering. It's only with nonfiction. With fiction books, I could recite the entire plot line, but with a book that I'm supposed to take something from, sometimes it's hard for me to recall it. But I took some notes. Basically, what I feel like how I would describe this book is it's a story of Og Mandino, the author, that he says happened in his life. Like I believe that this was an actual experience he had. And he is at kind of a low or mundane point in his life, and he meets this old man, Simon, and they kind of grow together, and Simon is very wise, and he's teaching him all these things about life and about faith, and shoot, you may have to help me out here.
He's like slowly helping him experience life transformation and look at things in a different light, I feel like.
Yeah, so Simon calls himself a rag picker, that he basically, when people sort of give up on themselves, he picks them up and helps them find their way again.
Yeah, he like Yoda.
I don't really know anything about Yoda, but if you say so.
Well, he's like a guide, right? So every good story, your hero is your main character, but there's always a guide, and
a mentor. He's mentoring him.
Yeah,
that's what's happening. So
yes.
he tells him about this thing that he wrote, that he says God helped him write. It's called the God Memorandum. And most of the way through the book, it's just him mentoring Mandino and kind of helping him grow to become the person that he eventually believes can carry on the God Memorandum like legacy. And there are some main points in the God Memorandum. You can actually find like an audio, like an audible, I don't know, like an audio book, but it's not the whole book. It's just the God Memorandum on YouTube. I would definitely recommend listening to that. Even if you don't have the book, like you don't have to read it, just listening to it on YouTube. It's very, very powerful. And the four main points that he kind of ends up like concluding with are count your blessings, proclaim your rarity, go another mile, and use wisely your power of choice. And then he says, do all things in love to succeed in these things. And he tells Og Mandino, to read the God Memorandum every night before he goes to bed for 100 days, and then to get it out in the world, because Mandino in the story is where he is talking about how he had written books in the past, and Simon knows that he can get this book published and that he can get this out into the world. And so basically what happens through the book is he tailors him to the person that he thinks can really understand this and take this on and spread it out into the world. And then he gives this to him and says, go give this to the people. And then he disappears.
I have goosebumps. I love hearing your recap because it's been quite a few years since I read this book. That was such a great recap, Chloe.
I hope it was.
Oh, that was so good. So there are a few things I love about this book, The Greatest Miracle in the World. One, it's super short. Like you could literally sit down and read it easily in a day, but really in probably a couple hours. It's 100 pages and they're like super little pages. It is a personal growth book, but
it's like a story.
It is. It reads like a story.
I think I liked this. Like I could get through this book
Mhm.
about at the reading speed. That's another thing that affects me is when I read fiction, I can read really, really fast. But when I try to read a nonfiction book, it like I just can't get through it. But I felt like with this book, it was like a good bridge between a story, not necessarily fiction, but a story and personal growth. Sort of like historical fiction,
Yeah.
where it's like based in truth, but it's a story.
It's such a good read, and it's such a just a short, quick, powerful, easy to read, just great book. And so she was talking a little bit about the God memorandum. It's included in the back of the book, and she was sharing that Simon writes the God memorandum, which is really inspired by the Holy Spirit,
Mhm.
and he gives it to Og to read, to share with the world, and then encourages you as a reader to listen to it for 30 days. Is that right?
I think it's 100,
Oh, was it 100 days? Okay,
I
okay.
think.
So, yeah, it's just ooh, it's such a good book. I think you really hit on the main points. One thing I love about this book is when you finish reading it, you're kind of in this headspace of like, is that a true story or is it not? Like, did
It's
that actually happen
it's
in
kind
his
of
life?
up to your own determination, and I think the things that you experience in your life and how you view things could definitely affect how you kind of conclude the story in your own head. But
Yeah,
there's not it's kind of like an open ending.
yeah.
It's just it's open. You can kind of determine what you think happened.
And I want to use this term angel encounter. Possible angel encounter.
Yeah.
Also, this won't make any sense until you read the book, but red geraniums. So every year at our house, I plant red geraniums, and it's all because of this book. But you'll have to read it to figure out why and what that means. Do you want to share anything about first steps to wealth as you're working through this? This is a bigger, thicker book, but man, it's a good book. So life-changing.
I haven't gotten very far through it. I think basically what I've gotten from kind of the first few chapters is that wealth isn't everything, but when you do have wealth, you can do more things to kind of further God's kingdom and to be a blessing to other people. Is that's kind of what I've gotten so far
Yeah, I would
that I
agree.
can remember.
One thing I love about First Steps to Wealth by Danny Johnson is it gives a little bit of wisdom on a lot of different areas of your life. So it talks about finances, relationships, communication, business, like it's all in there. It's just really power packed into this one starting point of a book. But it is a little bit longer book, a little bit bigger book, a little bit harder read. Definitely it's going to take you longer to get through that one than it did through The Greatest Miracle in the World. Yeah, but those are two good ones. Let's talk about our favorite parts of the books. So I get to share my favorite parts of Goose Girl, which I really kind of already alluded to mine, I feel like. Yeah, and then I want you to share your favorite part. We should do favorite parts of the book slash least favorite parts of the book or experience. Let's
Okay.
let's wrap it all up into that. So, favorite part of the book or experience and least favorite part of the book or experience. And again, I feel like I kind of already shared mine, but my favorite part was definitely the romance, the love story that unfolds and her journey of personal growth and just realizing who she really is and kind of like growing into that brave, secure, courageous girl. Like she's
That's my favorite part too.
really like
That and the romance, yeah.
okay. Well, okay, yeah. So we're right on par. So
And
she's
the friendships she makes.
the friendships,
Because
yeah,
that actually gets carried on throughout the series. I mean, you don't know that because you haven't read any of the other
yeah.
books, but the people that she meets in the first book are what the other books are about.
There are definitely wonderful themes of friendship and family. I mean, because the friendship that she makes really different characters in the book really become her family. Like I'm thinking about the lady in the woods that sort of takes her under her
Yeah.
wing, that's and just the friends that she makes. And it's like really cool to see her realize she's stronger than she thinks she is and she's capable of so much more than she thinks she is. So as much as I love personal growth, there's a lot of that in this book, right? That
Yeah,
as I'm reflecting, I'm realizing that.
it's like, but instead of for you, you're watching a character go through that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think I picked a really good bridge book And she picked a really good bridge book too, between fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah. And so Chloe, I just want to make a point. Chloe noted this, but the books of Bayern, there actually are 4 books. So this is the first one, The Goose Girl, and it is a series. So there are all the books that follow after this. My least favorite part of the book. Oh man. Okay.
Okay,
So,
but you can't spoil it.
okay.
The part that she didn't like, she can't spoil it.
Okay. So I was about halfway through the book and like I was doing really good. I was doing really good and spending hours and hours reading this book. And well, I already shared with you that I do not enjoy really violence or gore or tragedy or loss
Real life things.
or betrayal or any of the bad things that happen in this book. But yeah, I mean, some of that, okay, a lot of that is real life. You know,
Yeah.
Andrew Pudewa says you read fiction to realize truth. And I like, that was one thing I learned through this experience. And I'm totally seeing that more and more. But yeah, the main character experiences some loss and some grief, not only through the loss of her father, but also through another, we'll say, friend that's very dear to her. And it's pretty gruesome and brutal for a few pages.
But it had to happen. The storyline could not continue without that happening.
Oh, it was hard to read though. When I got to that part, I was like, I'm done. I was like, I'm done.
It did make me cry the first time I read the book. I'm not gonna lie about that.
I'm not gonna lie. That was hard. And I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I think I'm done now. But I pushed through and then I ended up loving the ending. So, yeah, that was my favorite and least favorite. I'll turn it over to you to share any.
Okay. I would say I should have been thinking while you were talking.
Well, either about the books themselves, and you can just go with the greatest miracle in the world book if you want. Favorite and least favorite part, or even favorite, least favorite part of the experience of, stretching and reading something different. Either way.
I really liked, so like she said, the angel encounter part of the book. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I can't ruin the book for you guys, but I feel like there were just parts of the actual storyline that I really connected with, and Mandino just illustrates it so beautifully of like the mentorship and the growth and the friendship between him and Simon. And I really liked that. And I just liked Simon as a character. He was like this grandpa type character that you just want to look up to and like sit at his feet and just listen to him. So I would say that him as a character, and then just kind of how their friendship grew and how he mentored Mandino, I would say was my favorite part. And my least favorite part is kind of silly, but the print is really small in the book. And so it was a fast read, but there were some times that I had to like, okay, hang on. I got to go back and read that whole page again because I think I skipped 4 lines, which you could probably get it in bigger print. I mean, that's just the one I have, but
I don't know. This is a mass produced paperback book, so I'm not sure you can get it in bigger print. It's really important to Chloe that the book feels pretty in her hands.
it is. Okay, we have to go off topic for a second. The way I hold my books is I hold them very gently open, and I don't put my thumb at the bottom of the book because I don't want to crease the spine, and I never dog ear my pages. I use a bookmark, and she just cracks it open and folds the pages, and it kills me.
Yeah, you got to read that sucker and love that sucker. It's really funny because our personalities are like totally flipped when it comes to the way that we handle books, because I am very like type A, organized, like everything in its place, and your bedroom looks very different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the way we handle our books, I'm like, read that thing, dog ear those pages, bend that spine. And Chloe's like, my books are precious. Like, don't even make a dent on my book. Like, I had to buy my own copy. I couldn't borrow Chloe's.
I was like, Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't give you this book. I love this book so much. I just can't.
But I will agree with you that the Goose Girl book it does feel very lovely in your hands, and it's just opened very nicely.
Yeah,
and it's
the
easy.
cover is like matte, so it's smooth and like soft, and it opens very nicely, and you can hold it one hand. There are just some things with like a physical book that I appreciate more than she does. But anyways.
Oh my gosh, we digress. Okay. I want to talk about, would you recommend the book to others? I'm going to let you go first. Yo, that was an instant.
Yes, because it's a book that you can, like she said, it's a short book. Anyone can read it. It's, even if you're a slow reader, this would take you less than a week of reading, like an hour a night or 30 minutes a night, however you would get to it. It's a book that is just easy to get through. And it's a story, and I feel like it really is life-changing. Like, even though I'm not good at remembering the exact points of the book, I know that it changed the way I look at things. And it's just, yeah, it's not like you have to read through 600 pages to get to the point. He kind of sprinkles the moral throughout the entire book. I don't like it when you have to read all the way to the end of a book to get really the juicy part of it. I feel like the entire book is just really, really good.
Okay, I have to just interject and say, as you're sharing that, I love just feeling like this was a mutually beneficially stretching project for both of us.
Yeah.
Like, I love hearing you
Yeah.
say, yes, I would recommend the book, The Greatest Miracle in the World. If you had to give it, so like say 10 stars is like your all-time favorite perfect book, how many stars out of 10 would you give The Greatest Miracle in the World?
Like an 8 or an 8.5.
That's pretty great.
Simply because I am very into fantasy, and there are just
Yeah.
some things that like a book about real life can't give you that a book about a princess can. So
That's fair.
on like a personal growth book level, 10 out of 10. But just in general, books that I read, probably an 8.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay, so The Goose Girl, I would absolutely recommend this book. I love seeing you smile as I say that. I would give this like a 9.5 out of 10. And again, I never and don't read fantasy, but this book was gripping, riveting, and all the other description words you can think of. Like, I would jump into this book and I would be reading at night. One night I read I think it was 4 hours straight. And I'd read like a chapter and then I'd be like, I'd look over and my husband,
Dad got tired of it, honestly. She just wouldn't go to bed.
he'd be laying there snoring and I'd be like, okay, one more chapter, one more chapter. And then the next thing I know, it's like 2:30 in the morning. And then the last night that I read it, I think I read like 150, 200 pages, something like that. And I don't know, it was like the wee hours of the night. I read like 75 pages and I was like, okay, like only 75 more pages, I'll finish it tomorrow. And then I was like, no, one more chapter. No, one more chapter. Oh my gosh, I just have to finish it. So it really just gripped me. And yeah, I would highly recommend this book. Whether you're into, fantasy fiction or not, I recommend it. It did something different to my brain. And I guess I just want to share that part of the experience. And I wanted to talk about that just for a second. If anything surprised you, or really challenged you about the experience. And since I kind of already started sharing, I'll just continue and then I'll hand it over to you. But I was surprised by what it did to my brain. The way that it caused me to kind of like slow down and relax and enjoy, because I just with my personality type, I don't do that very often. And I found myself just really wanting to sit down and relax and to keep reading and to enjoy this book. And it made me look at things in a different light and just feel different things and look at things in a different way. And so that I feel like it changed me. I seriously feel like reading this book changed me. And I
That's what a
sincerely,
good fiction book does.
yeah, I really mean that. How about you? Did anything surprise
Very
you?
similarly, except the opposite. I felt like it was a book that like showed me some purpose in my life that I hadn't seen before. Um, that made me want to kind of go do things in the way that yours made you want to kind of slow down. But I always read
Yeah.
books like that. And so it was like very out of my norm for a book to make me feel like, oh, I should, I should actually go get something done. I shouldn't just sit here and read for 6 hours. Nothing wrong with reading for 6 hours. I fully support you if you want to do that.
You do that all the time.
I do it all the time. But it was just different to read something that was like, okay, I should go do something.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it was just such a good stretch project. And again, the 400-page book, I read this in 12 days, I think it was.
Yeah.
And there were a few days in there where like I wasn't reading every single day, but I'd sit down and I'd read for like a couple hours and then, I don't know, a third of the book the last night when I was, finishing the whole book. So, okay, the burning question, will we ever recreate this experience? And or will you or I ever again read a book that's totally out of our zone that really stretches us?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Well, I had already planned on, I shouldn't say forcing myself, but kind of forcing myself to read more personal growth books. I have read some really great books. Another one that I would recommend is I Kissed Dating Goodbye by Joshua Harris. Totally off topic from what we're talking about, but it's another, I would say, personal growth book for like teens stepping into the dating realm. But that book was amazing. And then I just kind of slipped back into fantasy. Was like, okay, I'm just gonna keep reading books about mermaids. Um, but I know in my head that it's good for me to read books that will help me grow. My heart just wants to read fake stories. Well, not fake, but like stories.
Fiction stories.
Fiction.
Yeah.
Because
You know what?
that's what I love. But I do think I will, again, just because I think as I grow up, I'm gonna need more of things that are kind of helping me through life.
I like that answer. And I think that human beings love stories and that we need stories. Whether we know it or not, we need stories in our life. And so for me, the answer is a resounding yes. I can't believe I'm saying that, but yes, I
I can.
do. I do. I feel like this experience changed me, and I really do plan on reading some more fiction books as I can. In fact, I'm wanting to borrow your copy of The Witch of Blackbird Pond.
I'm sorry, you can't. That is my favorite book.
Okay, I'm
Like,
gonna have to
in the
buy my own
world.
copy because I can't touch Chloe's, but
That is my
probably
favorite book ever.
that probably is my next read. Yeah, you'd kill me if I dog-eared that book.
Mhm.
So
Don't do that.
that is my plan, is to grab a copy of The Witch of Blackbird Pond and I think read that one next. So
Oh, I could talk all day about that book.
another time, another podcast. Well, with that, guys, we hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I know I sure did. I felt like this was meaningful to get to spend this time together and just stretching and challenging in a lot of good ways. It might be a really fun thing for you to do with your own kids. Just recommend a book to each other. You can do it no matter what age your kids are. You could do it with all kinds of
Oh,
different
yeah.
books and genres. And it kind of, I feel like it gave us a little peek into each other's world on top of all the
Yeah.
other wonderful things that it did for us and like helped us gain a better understanding of just each other. So that was a blessing. So thank you so much, Chloe, for joining me on the podcast today. I love you and I'm really proud of the woman that you are becoming.
Thank you. I had so much fun. I love talking about books.